I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Good afternoon. Good to see all of you here. My friends are here. Brenda Lau Gray, Yusuf Mjini, Kamal King, and we're here to talk about what's on our minds this week. And I want to start with you, Yusuf. Just say hello to you, first of all. Good to see you again.
And you, brother. Good to be seen.
Yeah, what's on your mind?
Well, thinking about this surge with the Delta variant and COVID-19, I had a nephew who just spent a week and a half in the hospital, couldn't breathe, couldn't move his hands, and the very, very large majority of the people who are requiring hospitalization are the ones who have not been vaccinated, Al. So I'm really concerned about where people are getting their information and how much of it is truthful, how much of it is science-based, and how much of it is bogus, because there are a lot of people going down for the dirt nap, man. Sad, real sad.
We've been focusing on that here a lot. In fact, one of Brenda's articles this week in the upcoming edition of Insight, I think I sent you guys copies of it a few minutes ago. She talks about COVID-19 and the healing circle that we did on Friday. Last week, we had a brother named Ted Thompson kind of lay out a master class talking about our community and how we look at how we get information, how we assemble that information, and what we need to do to continue to educate ourselves and to be confident that we can make the right choices, to be both preventive, but also to use the therapies, to use the vaccinations that are there that'll help us be protected in the future. But the point he was making is that, and it's been said again and again, the pandemic now is a pandemic among the unvaccinated. That tends to be heavier in our community. And what we do about it, we should discuss.
There's a difference between information and knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And Google has finally decided that they are going to ban misinformation about COVID-19. Finally, after a year and a half, because people will go on the internet and see some information and think it's the gospel truth and then run with it and suffer the consequences. So people need to be very careful about citing the source and how legitimate, how reliable it actually is.
Great. Brenda, maybe before this conversation ends, you can pull up the story you just did and sort of share what some of the statistics are that you wrote in the upcoming edition of Insight News. That would be cool. Come on, let me jump to you, man. What's on your mind? How you doing? Good to see you, man. How was your trip to D.C.? You went to the National African American Heritage Museum.
Yeah,
we're jealous.
No, don't be jealous. Just get there. It was the trip was good. And first, let me say I'm glad to be back on. Good to see you, Yusuf, Brenda. The trip was good. Just learned a lot. That I guess, as you know, those first two floors are prior to slavery and during slavery. Learned a lot. I was glad to see that they didn't start at slavery itself, but started before and showed how trade was going on between the African nations and the European nations for hundreds of years before the Europeans decided to go into slavery, and show some very nice photographs of Africans before 1600. So that was pleasing to me. To follow up on Yusuf's concern, my wife went off the other day because of a post that Nicki Minaj put out. Just bad information, but she has like 20 million followers on Instagram. And so a lot of people are getting their information off of Instagram and places like forums like that. And it's just, it's just bad information, just not true. What's on my mind right now this week is watching our Congress see what they're going to do with regard to these bills that are before them, the infrastructure bill, the human infrastructure bill, and the debt ceiling. And I believe that the progressives, the people who are quoted as being progressives, are taking the proper stance by making them commit to the human infrastructure before they vote on the infrastructure bill because of what's occurred in the past. Liberals and progressives have gone along with, okay, we'll do this, and you promise that you're going to support us, and the promises get broken.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, time after time after time. So I think that they're taking the right position on that.
The other item, Kamal, that's been on the back burner for too long is the Voting Rights Act.
Right.
You know, what are we going to do about all this voting suppression? And we're in the middle of redistricting all over the country, and that could be another blow to whether we elect our representatives or whether they elect us. You know.
Right. So it's a lot happening politically this week or within the next few days. Let me say, because it could go out to 10 or 15 days.
The House Speaker said that she's going to bring that bill up this afternoon, come hell or high water. The infrastructure bill.
Good.
So what are the principles there, Kamal? If you would explain that, the difference between the human infrastructure and the general infrastructure bill. My understanding is that we're looking at a $3.5 trillion package. That is the larger package. That there's one move to disaggregate that and deal with the physical, the classical infrastructure elements, and come back to those things. But maybe you could explain that better than me. Yeah,
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the physical infrastructure, it has the support of the majority. They can get that passed pretty quickly. And
bridges, roads, highways, etc.
And that would be around 2 trillion or 1.9 trillion under 2 trillion.
I think broadband is included in that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not enough. Mm-hmm. It still doesn't add up to the 5 trillion that the Republicans gave the tax breaks to, And as Bernie Sanders has said, the human infrastructure which deals with daycare, shots, just stuff that people need, jobs, things that people need. Other than physical infrastructure, I think it started off as 6.5, and they brought it down to 3.5 trillion. And now the people are saying, the people who are against it are saying it's still too high. And I've always had a question about, what is government for? I know it's supposed to protect us. The defense is probably number one. But doesn't it include taking care of people? And I think that it's gotten to the point now where taking care of people is liberal socialism, and they put all these tags on it to scare people away. So I'm for both. I'm for the physical infrastructure, which I don't believe is enough, and the human infrastructure, which I don't believe is enough. Hope they don't cut back. I hope they can hold on and make these people vote.
Yusuf, jump in. What do you see as the challenges, and what are the incentives, the disincentives? How do you read, Yusuf, Senator Joe Manchin's position?
I was just thinking about that, Al, and you don't read him, because there are Democrats who are blocking the passage in both houses, House and the Senate, and that's criminal. That I hope that people back home are paying attention, because there were a number of Republicans who voted on the last joint measure that they were able to bring forward, because those Republican representatives did not want to go back to their home district and explain why they turned down all of that money. It's the same way that there were 30 Republican governors who refused the CARE Act, Obamacare. And I was watching TV, and they were interviewing one of them, and they said, well, is it the prescription involvement? He said, oh, no, that's wonderful. He said, well, is it pre-existing conditions? He said, oh, no, we really need that. He said, well, what seems to be the problem? You know what he said? It's the Obama part.
Right.
And I think that about sums it up. That, they like everything in it about the same. So and the federal government is paying 90% of the money to the states for 6 years to help states be able to readjust their budgets to be able to assume that responsibility. And we're talking about pay or die. children, spouses, grandchildren, wives who, don't have the medical coverage, who can't get the treatment. And it's a crime. It's an absolute crime that people would vote against health care for all.
It reminds me, the thought that came to mind, I've used this statement a lot, Kamal, and I talk about Africa all the time and white people in Africa. And I say that, white people love Africa, they just don't like the Africans. Mm-hmm. And so if they could have an Africa without the Africans, wouldn't it be a happy day for them? And that thought came up with the analysis you just gave, Youssef. If you ask them about all the benefits they get from the healthcare strategy, the program, they love it all. They just don't like that it came from Obama, right? And the fact that a black idea or a black man led the movement to solve a problem is something that they have an intrinsic aversion to.
And how many poor folks are in West Virginia that Joe mentioned can
a whole lot.
Can turn this money and this support down? They don't need an increase in the child care tax credits. They don't need the support for frontline workers. They don't need all of the other things that are included in the human infrastructure proposals. How can he go back and look those people in the face and tell them he's looking out for their best interest?
Yeah. The senator, I think it's the senator from Arizona, and I'm not certain what her name is, who's also kind of holding up the vote. And she's from what I can tell, she's trying to figure out which way the wind is blowing. Can she get reelected?
She's from Joe Arpaio country. Okay, the sheriff who's hell on Mexican immigrants down there, Central South Latin American immigrants.
So she's a congressperson, not a senator?
I'm not sure which, but she wants to be reelected.
Yeah, and that's that's
priority one.
Yeah.
Whoops, there it is.
Yeah, it's a big paycheck and a whole lot of benefits. A whole lot of benefits to being elected to either a senator or a congressperson.
So one of the things that Burnell Powell talked about last week, Dean Powell, was this is really a defining moment for President Biden, the Biden presidency, and whether he's going to be able to make the Democratic Party a genuinely and effectively run big tent organization is really the key right now. Because if he can't bring in Manchin and the other legislator, then that represents a certain failure. Burnell was saying that this is the time where Joe Biden ought to reach back and model his movement forward on LBJ. And what LBJ would have done and did in instances like this is bring in people in the party that were outliers and make them an offer they couldn't refuse. He said, what Biden ought to be saying to Manchin right now is, look, I know you want to get reelected, but here's what I guarantee you. If I don't get this through, you're not going to be reelected.
Right.
I will work against you and make sure that you don't have a future in politics if you don't support this action right now. And
that's what Trump did.
Described as LBJ hammer politics, but it worked.
Isn't that what Trump did?
Trump did it with the Republicans, as a matter of fact. Exactly. Yeah. And so I think that in some way the Democrats have to develop, an ability to show some nerve, right, and to demand of each other, a commitment, and to act on this articulated vision that the country, I think, agrees on. At least the progressives and Democrats do. Brenda, let me have you jump in here because I asked you to look at and think about.
I couldn't pull them up. Did you pull it up?
I did not. The stories that you did. Okay, that's our, we'll come back to it. But yeah.
Okay, but just
because you were talking about the pandemic and our people, being affected by it. Impressions, thoughts. You recited the numbers, the data, and how we're not out of the woods.
Well, right now it's 700,846. I know that figure because it just took me back, but I'm having.
Is that how many have died, Brenda?
Yeah. No, those are deaths in the United States.
Okay.
And globally, I think it's 2,480,000. I mean, it's just almost astronomical.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why these numbers have not shaken people.
Well, Trump said it was a hoax and you could drink bleach and, you'd be safe from the COVID-19 virus and that it was going to be gone in a week or two. I remember vividly.
Oh, yeah, I remember the bleach. But I'm thinking of the lady that's on Democracy Now! And she was saying the R1, the new variant, is more potent than the Delta.
Wow. And the Delta was 85% more.
Right. And I think this R1, there are 50 cases that are in the United States right now, and it is just transmitting like wildfire.
And the people who are getting infected are being younger and younger, in addition to being the unvaccinated.
But I told Al, and I wrote it in the article, I'm having a real difficult time with frontline workers. You are in the hospital watching people take their last breath, but you're getting PO'd at the president who wants to save your life. So you're not in that hospital bed or on a ventilator. It's not making sense.
Yeah, you can't make sense out of illogic. He's a Republican. He's a Republican telling you to do that, just like it was at Obama. It was Obama's health care. So even though you see it, it's a Republican telling you to do it.
That's deep.
No, it's a Democrat telling you to do it, so you don't want to do it. I was at one of the things that I was able to. I mean, it just jumped out at me coming from Georgia, being in D.C., how masked DC is. I mean, people walking down the street. It looked like Japan. It looked like when I was in Tokyo, 5 years ago.
It's supposed to.
The Asians have been wearing masks for years. And that's the way DC looked. They were masked. You wouldn't dare go into an establishment without a mask on.
And so, I bet you their numbers aren't up as high as ours.
No deaths, 0 deaths. In the newspaper, the 3 days I was there were 0 deaths, 0 deaths, as compared to 700 here in Georgia. So it just jumped out, coming from Georgia, where when I go out, as I went out this morning, and I go into establishments, especially if I go into a white establishment, I'm basically the only one with a mask on.
Let me take it a step further and talk about some of the consequences of this issue. Number one, there are container ships sitting at ports on both coasts that have thousands of unopened containers of products being shipped into the United States for consumption, because they don't have enough workers to unload and to empty and load those onto the back of trucks, okay? 3 months ago, it cost $5,000 to have a shipping container sent from Europe, Asia, or Africa to the United States. You know what it costs today for one shipping container? $50,000.
How much?
$50,000 just for shipping alone, 10 times.
And what was it at first?
5,000. So the price has gone up tenfold in 3 months. Take it a step further. In California, they have a gasoline crisis. You know why? They don't have enough drivers to drive the tankers to the gas stations to deliver the gas. They don't have a shortage of gas. They have a shortage of drivers. It's the same problem with the public schools here in the metro, they don't have enough bus drivers. I was in Walgreens yesterday to get my third booster shot and pick up a prescription. The line was a half hour long, and there were signs every 3 feet that said, come to work here in our pharmacy. We'll give you a $1,250 bonus just for signing up.
Wow.
Okay. And it goes on and on and on. I called to make a doctor's appointment yesterday. You know how long I was on hold? 5 minutes short of an hour. Okay. Because they don't have enough employees to man the phones.
Why aren't people working here? It's just, it used to be I could pay $12, and I would pay $15 an hour just for labor for people to come and do, yard work and stuff. Now it's $20 an hour.
Sure.
And if you can find someone.
Bus drivers do not want to be in a closed environment with a bunch of children who have not been vaccinated. So they're not reporting for work. They can't pay them enough to come to work. And the same thing is true for other people that go into densely populated situations, restaurants, dry cleaners, what have you, where there's a lot of public, shoulder to shoulder. And then you turn on the TV and you look at these sporting events and these musical concerts, and there's 50, 80,000 people 6 inches apart, and you have to wonder how many of them are going to be hospitalized in the next 15 or 20 days. The consequences of COVID with this surge and with the Delta and the new virus that Brenda was talking about are just going to ripple through our economy, and are going to be crippling economically, because the people who haven't been vaccinated don't want to expose themselves, even though they don't want the vaccine. And many of the people who have been vaccinated, because of the fact that these mutated versions are so much worse than the original, even though my nephew has been vaccinated twice, and he was in the hospital for a week and a half, couldn't breathe, couldn't move his hands. Okay, just got out of the hospital with COVID, and he had the Delta variant. The good news is that if you are vaccinated and you get infected, the medical consequences will be less severe than if you were unvaccinated or only had one shot, because you have to wait 3 weeks between the Pfizer and the Moderna. And a lot of people don't know that the Moderna virus, or the Moderna vaccine, was invented by an African-American female scientist, a black woman invented the Moderna. And the Johnson & Johnson, you only need one. But they're going to open it up to children probably within the next 10 days to 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And, the children don't have the strength in their immune system, and tend to get hit much harder than full-grown healthy adults. Mm. So people really need to do their homework and wear the masks and be protective as much as humanly possible, because we're just losing too many people too close.
How were you able to get your booster shot, Yusuf?
The only qualification, Al, is number one, that you be a frontline worker. Number two, that you are over 65 or 70. Number three, that you have a compromised immune system, or that you have diabetes, that you're obese, that you have respiratory issues, or issues that make you more susceptible to get seriously ill if you do contract the virus and get infected. And at the pharmacy or the clinic or wherever you go, call first, because I was able to walk right into Walgreens. You didn't need an appointment, but many of the places are requiring you to call and schedule an appointment. And you can either call and ask or look at the form when you get there, or the form is available online through the health department. You can fill it out in advance and take it in. And it lists the 6 or 7 different criteria for people who are eligible based on age, diabetes, obesity, other health challenges. If you have any kind of respiratory or sickle cell or other serious health challenges, you would qualify to get the booster shot. And they're free. They don't cost anything. So
you talked about people gathering now, and we have a big football game this weekend, didn't we? I think it was sold out. The Vikings game. What about
classic
that?
example, you know, and they pan the crowd, and maybe a quarter to a third are wearing a mask, and the others are full of oil and lit up and
right,
and howling and carrying on, and it's sad, man. It's predictable, you know. Folks get stuck on stupid, and you can't talk to them, you know. And I've got a couple of friends who won't call me because every time they do, I'm challenging them. Look, you're intelligent.
Your shot.
You know, you are smart. You are pretty. You are, you know, what did Viola Davis tell a little child in Help? You know, go get that shot, girl. You know, go on with it. You know, you got a 100% chance of taking a dirt nap if you don't get it, and a 97% chance of not getting infected if you do. Would you go to the casino with those kind of odds? 100% chance of losing, or 97% chance of at least breaking even? You know? Yeah. Come on. Yeah.
Hey, can't make logic out of no logic.
Yeah, you can't make some of this stuff up. You know?
Yeah.
Let's all go to the game and mingle with 50,000 people.
What do you think?
Let's shake the dice and see what happened. You know, that's like playing Russian roulette with a single fire pistol, man. You know,
right.
Leroy Gardner Sr. used to say, it don't make no sense at all. Not at all.
These NBA players, I'm so fed up with Kyrie Irving. You know, if I own a team, as good as he is, you know, he has shown that, you know, there's some issues. There are just too many issues that you have to deal with outside the court. And these guys not getting vaccinated. I felt the same way about Cam Newton, and I love Cam Newton. I've been watching him since he was in the 10th grade, play ball down here. And for him not to be vaccinated, I don't care what the coach said up there. That had to factor into him being cut.
And these folks are not sitting in the stands, Kamal. They're sweating and butt dancing and body checking, and
exactly.
You know, tongue is darn near going in somebody's helmet. You know, I mean, that just, you know, the chances of contracting the virus are not numerical. They're geometric. You know, it's like 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128 times, you know, minding your own business if you're involved in physical contact of any kind. You know?
Right. And if your teammates are dependent on you.
What about maybe that argument, Kamal, that some of the athletes are making, that they have a right not to? I was talking to my wife about that, and the question was whether athletes could say, make the argument, it's their body, their health, and they can choose to or not to, versus the argument of you're choosing not to endangers other people. Where do their rights end? Where do their rights end? Yeah. And then there was something that was happening this week where I'm not sure if it was in the protest arena or not, but I had the thought that this is kind of like taking a knee. I mean, there was an issue, I can't remember what it was, where I made the link between Kaepernick taking a knee in protest and these guys taking a position in protest, but it's not the same.
No, it's not.
Yeah. No, it's not.
Because the other athletes had the right to stand up. And if you're an athlete who has been vaccinated, you have the right not to have somebody unvaccinated body checking you and sweating on you and playing across the line, tackling you, and, you know, making that physical contact.
It's like the in most of the sports now, once blood is in the ring, the sport stops, right? Not the ring, but on a team sport.
Right. Yeah. Right. And it's a team sport, and to me, it's the same. It's just multiplied. You know, when it comes to team sports, the same. I feel as though I have the same right. You have the right not to be vaccinated if you don't want to be vaccinated, but you shouldn't be around me.
Hey, give them the right not to play and not to get paid, and see if they change their minds.
Right.
Okay?
You shouldn't, maybe we should put a N on their head, NV, not vaccinated. So at least we'll be able to tell, so we can stay away from them. But they don't want to be vaccinated. Here in Georgia, you have people who don't want to be vaccinated and don't want to wear masks and don't want their kids to wear masks, but want them to go to public school. Insanity. It's insanity.
It's all over the country, bro. It's not just at home. It's crazy. Yeah. And people do have the right not to take the vaccine, and I support that. But if they do, they ought to quarantine themselves. They should not have human contact with anybody, their dog or the squirrels or the birds in the neighborhood or nobody. Okay, keep it to yourself. Okay, that's your right. Yeah, and don't get paid for not doing it at the same time.
Correct.
Yusef, last time you were on, we talked about this spate of gun violence in the community. A couple of days ago, I had a couple of young people on, one of whom was a candidate for city council for the 9th Ward in South Minneapolis, a brother named A.J. Flowers, Al Flowers' son, bright young guy. And another young guy, you knew his grandfather like I did. You knew Ray Island, I believe, right? You knew Ray Island, his grandson.
One of your General Mills coworkers.
Right. Well, no, he was at Pillsbury.
Okay, that's right.
Ray Island was at Pillsbury, not at General Mills. But we talked about two things, and I'd love to get you all's thoughts on it. One, we talked about the question of guns. And, our community is beset by presence of guns, illegally obtained guns and properly used guns, and properly in the sense that we're using them to kill each other. And so while on the one hand, we're decrying it properly should be police violence, police abuse, we also are decrying the speed with which we do each other in using bullets, guns, violence, etc. So that's one side. Then there's the other side, that's a Second Amendment side. And I think, Kamal, you talked about this before, about our people weighing in on gun safety, gun training, gun ownership. How do you see our community navigating that discussion? Number one, getting rid of guns or making guns less available as one of the means of reducing the proliferation of gun violence versus the admonition that many are making that, like other Americans, Black Americans ought to be armed as well. So let's have that discussion again. Kamal, what is that? The Second Amendment, right?
No, it's a book by Carl Anderson. And I think I mentioned it to you before.
You did.
The second, Race and Guns in a Fatally Unequal America. Race and Guns in a Fatally Unequal America by Carl Anderson, who's a professor here at Emory University. As I stated before, I'm not a gun advocate, but America is a gun crazy country as far as I'm concerned. I believe that it's going to take some curtailment. I wish Burnell were on, because Burnell has a theory with regard to how the gun rights have just exploded far beyond what the founders had anticipated or even thought about. But I think that gun ownership needs to be reduced tremendously. That's my personal opinion, that, everyone doesn't need a gun.
Yusef, where do you wait, and how do you discuss this, and what are you hearing in your circles?
Well, several things. Let me put a couple of qualifiers on this first, Al. Individual states are receiving American Rescue Plan or COVID funding, and a percentage of that funding is earmarked for communities of color or for organizations that are constituency governed who are serving communities of color. And today is September 30th, which is the last day that people have to provide input to the governor's office for how those funds should be used in the state of Minnesota. And they're called ARP, American Rescue Plan funds. Our governor, Tim Walz in Minnesota, also set aside $15 million for public safety. Mm-hmm. After George Floyd was murdered in the Twin Cities. And I would encourage people who are listening to contact their governor's office, their state legislator, their representatives, their state representatives, on how COVID funds should be spent in their state or in their local community. And I would encourage people who are tuned in Minnesota to contact Governor Tim Walz's office and share your input on how you think. You know, we got almost $2 billion in funds in Minnesota in COVID funding, American Rescue Plan. And it's for after school, it's for health, it's for closing the achievement gap, it's for public safety, it's for anti-gang measures, for tutoring, etc. And we have a lot of community-based organizations. I know, Al, that the folks from North Minneapolis met with the governor's office and were attempting to gain some support for the 21 Days of Peace campaign over in North Minneapolis, in your neck of the woods.
Right.
But the funding is out there. Also, there has been about $8 or $10 billion in funding that has been earmarked by corporate and foundation giving programs. And we have the wind at our back in terms of accessing philanthropic dollars. And all of this has occurred since the death of George Floyd. Local foundations, national foundations, Simi Valley foundations, corporations, wealthy individuals have all said, we're going to commit $100 million or $500 million for equity, inclusion, racial justice, social justice, etc. And there's no better time for nonprofit organizations or community groups to be attempting to obtain some of these resources, because a lot of times the money that comes into our community is not under the control of people who look like us or who represent us. All right. And so those organizations that are constituency governed, which means a majority of the people on the board of directors are the constituents of the organizations that serve our communities, need to be encouraged and supported in trying to gain access to some of these funds. There are a lot of groups. There's a group here in the Twin Cities of mothers of gun violence victims who have put together their own public policy proposals. And they're getting frustrated at other people who are attempting to speak on their behalf who've had no communication with them, that say, I know what's best for these people. And some of those people are easily recognizable. But they've put together, Al, a very good public policy program. And Angela Myers, who is the president of the Minneapolis chapter of the NAACP, has been working with them and sharing their public policy proposals. So I think the mothers of young people who have been killed by needless gun violence ought to be brought into this discussion. The people, because when somebody in the family gets shot, it affects the entire family. You know, look at Naida Presley, you know, lost her former husband, Dennis Presley, her granddaughter, the Presley girl that was one of those 4 children found in that car in that abandoned cornfield, and her mother died last week. And the funeral for Heloise Neal, her mother, is tomorrow. Roger, Winifred, and Naida's mom is tomorrow, 12:30 at Camphor Methodist Church. So our community, Kamal, is split on the basis of age in terms of the people who don't want people armed and the people who follow Robert Williams' example, or Malcolm X, Negroes with guns, you know, who do want to be armed for self-defense or, you know, to protect their children and their family. And I think it's not so much just that guns are out there, but what kind of guns are out there? Saturday night specials, assault weapons. Now they've got a device that turns these semi-automatic pistols into fully automatic, just like they had that bump stock that boy in Las Vegas had that shot 200 or 300 people. Right. There was supposed to be a hip hop concert in that stadium, and it got postponed. And instead, it was a country western.
And nobody told him.
Hotel across the street poked a hole in the window and was just, had people jumping around like cockroaches in a frying pan trying to get away from the bullet spray. And, look at what 12 people were shot last weekend in Minneapolis out, 3 of them in critical condition. And we spoke a few weeks ago about 179 bullet casings, being found shot in less than 2 hours in St. Paul. And it's at a point where you can't even tell your kids, stay out of this neighborhood or stay out of this location, because there was a black coach with his son who was coming back from a football game. Where was he at? In Anoka or somewhere, and got shot in a road rage. And there was another brother with his wife a couple of weeks ago. Somebody had blocked his car in, and he pulled up next to them and put down the passenger side window. And the wife said, would you mind moving so that we can get out? You're blocking us in. And the person in the passenger seat in the other car said, don't pay no attention to that B word woman. And the brother who was driving said, brother, excuse me, that's my wife. You shouldn't be talking to her like that. And the person in the passenger seat pulled a gun out and shot the driver of the other car with the woman in it dead, And then the first car sped off,
Right.
That was blocking everybody. So it's crazy stupid, man.
Yeah. What has there been any developments on the 2 young people who were found in the cornfield?
Well,
go ahead. Yeah.
There were 2 males and 2 females who were approximately 30 years of age. They all had been shot in the mouth, in the face, in the back of the head, all killed needlessly in St. Paul, and then driven around for 7 hours, and then driven 65 miles east, 50 miles into Wisconsin. And the car was driven into the middle of a cornfield. The boy went to his mama's house and had his mama and his daddy, his biological father, in the car with him, asked his daddy to follow him so he could dump this car, okay? And they're being filmed on the interstate, under the bridges, in gas stations, all up and down the highway. These 2 cars, one is following the other. The father followed the son to Wisconsin and then picked him up and brought him back to Minnesota.
So they found him. They found who did it.
They arrested the father. He claimed he didn't know there were any bodies in the car, but the video in the gas station where he got out and put gas in the SUV showed him at the open window on the front seat passenger side with one of the young women slumped over in a pool of blood in the front seat passenger seat. He said the car had tinted windows, so he couldn't tell whether there were bodies inside, but the front window was completely down. Yeah. And he was exchanging something with the driver. His son was the driver. Now, they took the boy out to the airport, okay, the youngster, 38 years old, and he got on a plane, flew to Arizona. He's got a uncle or a cousin who plays in the NFL. Told him, look, you ain't bringing this drama to my house, and took him to the police department in Scottsdale, Arizona, and turned him in.
Good.
Now, he is now saying he told his father that he snapped and shot a couple people, okay? The father confessed that. Now he's telling the police that he didn't shoot him. It was a drug cartel that shot the 4 people.
Yeah. Okay.
So they have the father and the son in custody, and they have both been charged with 4 counts of second-degree murder. The FBI is involved because they carried the bodies across the state line. And it's really racked this community because one of the young men, his father is a local pastor, good brother, and a contractor. They all come from good families,
What about the perpetrators? Were they white or black or Hispanic?
They were black, and the kids were black. So black on black, and just heart-wrenching, sad. 4 young lives just wasted, and They got video of them in 2 bars, you know, in St. Paul, and all up and down the highway in the gas station. And
yeah, I would bet that kid has had problems way before this particular incident.
And the father too. Father had several felony warrants.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. And you can pretty much see what's going on at an early age. You know, by the time they're in the 4th grade, 3rd or 4th grade, and parents come in and the parents are protecting unruly children, you know, it just escalates. It escalates to, you know, this to end up in this kind of situation.
And one of our challenges,
identified early.
One of our challenges as parents is that we love our sons and we raise our daughters. Mm-hmm. Okay, and we've got to change that equation and start raising both of them, because when the kids do something, they're just sowing their oats. You know, when the girls do something, we want to get a gun and go after somebody. Okay, or when something happens to them, and we've got to start at home with our own.
Yes.
Yeah, and like I said, you can't tell them where not to go, because they're getting shot everywhere, downtown, suburbs, in the hood, out of the hood. You know,
so what you said that there's a dichotomy between old or
old and young. It's almost an even split in terms of people who want some kind of self-protection, and the elderly people. You know, it's the same split as it was between Dr. King and Malcolm in terms of who supported them in the community. And the older generation, this what we fondly call the civil rights generation, don't want any guns in the home. You know, the grandparents. And the younger people not only want guns, they want concealed carry permits, okay, to protect themselves, because they're just so fearful of the kind of nonsense, you know, that's taken people's lives. And the real crime is these 3, 5, 7, 10, 12-year-olds who are getting shot, mm-hmm. you know, accidentally in these drive-bys. You know, mm-hmm. they just pull the guns out and start, you know, firing like crazy every which way. And, you know, when then 179 shots were fired, there were 400 people in this party house, okay, with a boom boom room and a strip pole. And guess what? Nobody saw nothing, okay? The police were looking for license plates or descriptions or automobiles or clothing. Nobody saw nothing, okay? And, you know, that's on us.
You know, I don't know any statistics, but just based on what I hear and what I've seen, I would think that there are more killings. There are a lot more killings of people who have guns and shooting people than there are people who are protecting themselves.
Yeah.
If that mm-hmm. makes sense. I mean, if you got a gun and you're trying to protect yourself, I bet you there are very few of those people mm-hmm. are around that you can actually use your gun to protect yourself.
The ones who buy them for protection have trigger locks on them. They're hidden so that the kids and the grandkids can't get to them. The one reason for not having them is people break into people's homes and steal those guns, you know, and then use them in the commission of crimes. But the people getting shot, by and large, are younger people, 18 to 25, okay? And they're dying from lead poisoning, the kind that comes out of a pistol, okay? Yeah. The other reality is that the reasons why some of these folks are shooting at each other just defy common sense. Somebody made a comment about somebody on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or one of those social messaging applications, and then now there's got to be a shootout. You know, this is not New Orleans 1850 where people go under the trees and have a duel, and they're just shooting indiscriminately or driving by and shooting, and a lot of innocent people who have absolutely nothing to do with the beef are winding up shot, hospitalized, or dead.
Let me throw this in. You know, Russia is beginning to curtail video games, the violent video games.
And China is too.
There's a game called.
And China is too, yeah.
There's a game called Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah.
Where if you pick up a prostitute, have sex with her, and then strangle her, you get extra points. Okay? And these kids are playing these games 8, 10, 12 years old. What kind of relationship are they going to have with young ladies when they get into high school and start dating? If that's how they're being primed and prepared for social interaction. You know?
Yeah, China's curtailing it. I mean, they cut way back. I mean, it's like 2 hours a week, Alvy.
2 hours a week, 2 hours a week, and only on weekends for 1 hour a day. Yeah, for social media for children, and they're going into a serious lockdown on that. You know, let me share with a couple of the comments. Michelle Madison, who's with us all the time. Michelle, good to see you, and thank you for being here. I've invited Michelle to join the program. She said she will in the future, but she says her 31-year-old son has a gun in Virginia. And he says that he has it for his family protection. So there's that argument. And the people I interviewed this past week, a good argument, I thought, about gun ownership had to do with legal gun ownership means you've registered. It means that you've taken the step to disclose to the authorities that you possess the weapon. And typically it can and should mean that you have some training, and that his sense is that people that go through the process of legally purchasing guns are generally more aware, more trained, more accountable and responsible. They certainly know that if they use the weapon, they are going to be traced to the weapon. Even if they give it to somebody else, it'll come back to them. So that he called a mitigating factor, a good in a good sense, versus the stuff that's being bought in the swap meets and the flea market trade and the illegal stuff, and
no background check.
Yeah, that gets into a whole arena of carelessness and just abject. What's the right word for it? Insanity, I think. So that's a big issue. It's a big issue with the guns. And so the question is, should we be, Kamal, encouraging our people to understand the ownership of guns in the visible, in the responsible and accountable protocol? Is there a protocol that talks about how we use firearms the same way the protocol about driving is driver's training? Take the test, get renewed, get reviewed. There are lots of things we do that require certification, qualification. Ought we be able to bring that more broadly into the life of community? And what does it mean when a lot of Black people get armed? There I'm thinking, Yusef, about Robert Williams. What do you think?
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Al. And many people who have concealed carry permits have never carried the weapon, but they get a concealed carry permit. In order to get it, you have to go through the written and the physical training to prove that you understand the law, the safety precautions, and that you're proficient. You have to go to a gun range and prove that you're proficient in the operation and safe handling of that firearm. So it's a tough issue. I think we have to crack the background check issue because, we've got, the trial is up right now for that 17-year-old boy from Illinois who went to Kenosha, Wisconsin and shot them 3 people. Had somebody else go in Kmart or Walmart and buy him the gun, automatic, assault weapon.
That was a white kid.
Yeah, 17 years old. Had no business with it. Shooting up, and the police giving him bottled water. He
driving past him, right?
Yeah, crazy. Crazy. Yeah, and that couple that was pointing their guns down in your neck of the woods, Kamal, at the Black Lives Matter march that was going in front of their house.
Yeah, St. Louis. St. Louis.
Yeah. Was that St. Louis? Where the judge said, no harm, no foul. It didn't shoot anybody, so we're going to let them go.
Right.
And they're standing up on their balcony and pointing their weapons at peaceful, marchers, Black Lives Matter march.
As opposed to the kid, as opposed to the young man, I think it was that Castile who told the cop that he had a gun?
Yeah, that he had a concealed carry permit.
Yeah, and the policeman shot him, what?
Policeman said, "Don't reach for you." Bang, 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 bang. Shot him 7 times, which is his 4-year-old daughter in the back seat behind his fiance.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
On streamed on Facebook.
And that's what Carol Anderson talks about.
5 years ago.
That's what Carol Anderson talks about. Gun rights are not for us.
That boy was hired by the Fort Worth Police Department too.
I got a good buddy down there who I advise of that.
His name is Geronimo Yanez.
Yeah, I told him the name. And hopefully his fraternity will at least speak out about it.
Listen, guys, we're out of time. This is good. But the other topic, I want to prep this for next week maybe, is I'm interested, maybe you can know somebody who can come on board to talk with us, is our attitude towards legalizing marijuana. What's been the experience of Black people in California, in Colorado, and cities that have changed their policy towards marijuana use and possession, and also medical and recreational? And what does that mean for the numbers of Black people that have been incarcerated behind existing and previous marijuana laws, while on the other hand, or at the same time now, the sentiment of the nation is changing, and in certain places and potentially everywhere eventually, marijuana use and possession will be decriminalized. What do we do about that? How do we have that discussion and be planful? And the planfulness I'm talking about is looking at the economics of marijuana, like looking at the economics of alcohol. We're not in that space. The economics of marijuana, even the economics of pharmaceuticals, right? Yeah. There are many things that we're not doing that we could and should be doing, but we certainly are consuming. So that's a thought to think about this week.
That's a good subject. That's a good subject.
Public Broadcasting has a program called Nova, and this week they're broadcasting a 1-hour documentary on the effects of people who smoke marijuana daily. It's about addictions to cannabis. And many public broadcasting stations that have a sister station will rebroadcast it tonight. It was on Nova last night, or you could go to the Nova website on PBS, and it's very thoughtful, science-based.
Thank you.
Let's close with a book recommendation. Like people love your recommendations, Yusef and Kamal. Anything people should be reading?
Here it is. Eddie Glaude Jr. Is It Nation Time? Contemporary essays on Black power and Black nationalism.
How's the last name spelled?
Glaude. Eddie Glaude Jr.
Okay.
Is It Nation Time?
Okay. Great.
Yeah. It's got about a dozen essays in it.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good subject, Alvy. Al Harrington, the former basketball player, professional basketball player, he's in the business of cannabis.
Okay.
And his goal is to make 100 Black millionaires, and he's putting other Blacks in the business of cannabis. But I think that the larger subject is the impact.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, and you know that they can't get any kind of bank accounts because it's still considered illegal. It's a federal crime.
Yeah, so but they're working on that now, Yusef. That bill is before Congress as we speak to take that away so that they can go use the banks now because they're getting robbed.
Regular.
Well, let me see if I can find an expert or two, somebody in the business to join the conversation next week, and we'll see where we go with it.
Somebody who can comment on marijuana for pain management, because that's a big driver of this discussion.
Sure, great.
Glaucoma, other stuff.
CBD.
What is that? CBD oil?
CBD oil for my back.
Right. But that has no that has very little THC in it. What gets people high in marijuana, right?
Right.
Yeah. CBD.
All right, guys. We'll see you next week. Take care. Thank you so much.
Be safe. All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Oh, Queen Justice, where are you? Did they beat you up or no? Lock you on the ground, take the crown away from you?
Oh, Lady Liberty, red, white, and blue. Did they take your dignity? vanity with the bigotry. Teach you that you're born to lose.
Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough. We've had enough of all the rules you break. We've had enough of all the money you make. We've had enough, no more life at stake. We've had enough, this is a proclamation. It's been 400 years and we're 400 late. Together we stand from state to state. Going back in time won't make America great. We need justice now, people won't wait. Action, no more distraction. Every step we take, we gain traction. If it can happen to one, it can happen to all. United we stand, divided we fall. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough. We've had enough of all the rules you were breaking. We had enough of all the money you were making. We had enough, no more life gets taken. We had enough, this is a proclamation. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, just roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough. We've had enough of all the rules you're breaking. We've had enough, all the money you're making. We've had enough, no more life gets taken. We've had enough, this is the proclamation. We've had enough. Trayvon Martin and Tommy Rice. We've had enough. Michael Brown and Eric gonna pay the price. We've had enough. Philando, Breonna, George Floyd. What? We've had enough. So many gone.